Sam Harris, welcome to Within Reason.
Yeah, great to be here. Great to finally meet you.
I was elated to hear that Alex O'Connor and Sam Harris had finally met to have a conversation about morality. Ever since Alex first criticized Sam's objective conception of morality, I couldn't wait for Sam Harris to respond. Unfortunately, very early in the debate, they ran into a misunderstanding and talked at cross purposes without realizing it. Just to remind you of Sam Harris' basic argument, his first premise is that morality can be grounded in the well-being of conscious minds. The second premise is that minds and their states are natural phenomena, fully constrained by the laws of nature. Therefore, there must at least in principle be right and wrong answers to questions of morality that fall within the purview of science. Alex O'Connor disagrees with the first premise, that morality can be grounded in the well-being of minds, and he illustrates this by giving the following analogy.
But I'm imagining a world in which everybody subjectively agrees that the color blue is the best color. I don't know what happens to our brain, some kind of pill that everyone's forced to eat, where if we look at any other color, we're just a bit sort of repulsed by it. We think it's disgusting. Maybe it makes us feel a bit queasy, right? And so everybody just agrees that blue is the best color. In the same way that if two roommates are trying to decide what color to paint a room, and they both just happen to subjectively value blue, you can treat it as if it were the case that blue is objectively the best color.
Mm-hmm.
You can know objective facts about what to buy and what not to buy when you go to the paint store, right? That's all fine. But if I were to claim that because we both just instinctively prefer the color blue, and because we can know scientifically on the basis of that what color paint to go and buy at the shop, if I were to then say that I can scientifically establish that blue is the best color, that blue is what we should be going for, I think I'd be making a mistake.
I will explain in a moment how the color analogy that Alex presents is disanalogous to morality in one important way. But first, I want you to hear how Sam Harris reacts to it.
Well, so I think if you push the analogy further, I probably don't have a problem with it. So I would acknowledge that there's a boundary, that the boundary between what we might call aesthetics and what we're always tempted to call morality or ethics when things become more important. I think that's fuzzy, and if aesthetic differences were, if you just turned up the dial of their importance, right? So if the difference between we can stick with color, I think it's less visceral for people than taste, but yes, I mean let's just say that there was a certain color you could see that the pleasure of seeing it was so extraordinary that it just became one of the most important parts of any person's life to just get more of that color, around them, right? The moment you dial up the happiness factor with respect to seeing this color, the more it edges into moral and ethical terrain. Whereas, if you deprive someone of this color, well, then you really this is a kind of crime against them, right? And we'd want to send you to prison, right? So
Sam doesn't repudiate Alex's analogy. In fact, he criticizes it only by arguing that color isn't sufficiently important to us as humans to encroach on the territory of morality.
In that case, I think that we stop talking in analogy, and we're no longer talking about color as an analogy for pleasure. We're just talking about color as balanced on top of pleasure. We sort of just push the analogy until we're just talking about pleasure again.
Mm-hmm.
Alex rightly counters that if color actually had this kind of importance, we would simply be talking about well-being again, thereby proving the point that even if everyone agrees we should maximize well-being, it doesn't actually make it objectively true that we ought to maximize well-being. His point is that consensus is not the same as truth. The conversation simply moves on without this misunderstanding ever being cleared up, leading to a lot of, in my opinion, unnecessary talk at cross purposes. What Sam Harris should have pointed out at this juncture is that the color blue, unlike well-being, exists without human or animal minds to perceive it. Of course, without minds, there'd be no experience of blue, and yet that wavelength surely exists independently of any observer. The goodness of the color blue is not actually a property of the color itself. it only becomes a good color in relation to our preferences. Thus, the judgment that blue is the best color remains subjective, even if everyone agrees that it is so. Well-being, on the other hand, can't exist without human or animal minds. There wouldn't be anything to be well. Consequently, there'd be no one to label anything as good or bad without anyone alive to whom anything can seem good or bad. Everyone surely agrees that it's an objective fact that well-being exists. If you're alive, you're either currently experiencing well-being or remember a time when you have. The fact that it can't exist independently of you doesn't preclude anyone from making objectively true statements about your subjective states of mind. To show this, I want you to think of a number between 1 and 10. Now, without telling me what number you thought of, I can assert that the number you had in mind was 7. Is there any doubt that my guess is either true or false? Objectively so? Either I'm right about the number you thought of, or I'm not. In no way does the fact that it only exists in your mind, that is, subjectively, diminish my capacity to make objective truth claims about it. There's another way to think about this. Unless the words we use actually refer to something real, they can't be used to communicate meaning to other people. The word blue refers to a certain wavelength on the electromagnetic spectrum, and words like love, jealousy, and anger refer to objectively real emotions that everyone is acquainted with. So because people use words, such as good and bad, they must also necessarily refer to something objectively real. Otherwise, no meaning is communicated. If the worst possible misery for everyone isn't bad, I don't know what bad means. And anything that moves us away from the worst possible misery to its antithesis, something like sublime well-being, we refer to as good. That some people claim they don't mean this by good and bad doesn't change the fact that they actually do. A religious person might say, well-being is irrelevant to morality. An action is good insofar as it's commanded by God. One might ask, why ought you do what God commands? Because God rewards the righteous with a place in heaven, a place of ultimate well-being, whereas the antithesis thereof, hell, is construed as a place of eternal suffering. At the end of the day, religious ethics is still concerned with well-being, if not in this life, in the hereafter. The statement well-being is good might as well be a tautology akin to good is good, because if we label anything good, it's meaningless unless it's in reference to well-being.